Remember back in the old days when Rockstar Games actually released, full-fledged games instead of DLCs? I know it might be hard for you to believe that Rockstar Games actually made retail games that focused on storytelling rather than online monetization. And I think I speak for everyone here, but Rockstar Games became the juggernaut what they are in the industry, all thanks to their games released on PS2/Xbox era. While on PS4 we can only name 2 games from the top of our heads, GTA 5 and Red Dead Redemption 2, not including GTA Definitive Edition because that can go f*** itself. And on the PS3, I can name a couple of classics like GTA 4, Max Payne 3, Red Dead Redemption, Rockstar Table Tennis, and LA Noire.
Oh my!
I was surprised to see the amount of games released by Rockstar Games during the PS2 era. From GTA 3, Vice City, and San Andreas to Midnight Club, a racing game series that almost rivaled Need for Speed series, Bully, Red Dead Revolver, and The Warriors. Rockstar Games at the time was in the news thanks to a certain lawyer who shall not be named, but what really made the company famous or infamous, depending on where you stand on the matter, was Manhunt 2.
It's American stores tomorrow and it's making a lot of noise. There's an international outcry against it. Manhunt 2 is so violent, it's been banned in Britain. In fact, you may not want your kids to see the preview of this game in Daniel Seberg's Eye on Technology.
Tonight, a violent video game pulled from store shelves.
Manhunt 2 has been the target of criticism since its release a week ago. Now Target is doing something about it.
Intention was to create the perfect weapon.
This advert is for new video game Manhunt 2. Players take the role of an escapee from a mental institution on a killing rampage. Described as callous, bleak and full of unrelenting violence, it's just been banned in Britain for the second time.
Oh my God, corny, lame, boo, tomato, I'm throwing tomatoes.
I have to throw a disclaimer here and let you know that I have not played Manhunt 2, but I remember playing and enjoying the first one. Now that I managed to sit down with the game again, I feel like I need to make a video on it and let you know how the PS2 classic holds up. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Manhunt for PS2. Released in 2003 for PlayStation 2, Manhunt was developed internally at Rockstar Games. The game was ported to Xbox and PC in 2004. Manhunt is a third-person stealth game that follows our protagonist James Earl Cash as he tries to survive the cold streets of Carcer City in what can only be described as the longest night of his life. And right about now I just realized that this video will more than likely to be deranked, demonetized, or whatever YouTube does to restrict the visibility of games like this. You know, the ones that spray crimson colored body juice all over. So yeah, like, subscribe, all that spiel. Now I will be talking about the game's story, so if you don't want any spoilers, jump to the timestamp shown on the screen right now. You have been warned.
James Earl Cash, found guilty and sentenced to death.
Our game opens up with our hero Cash being put to death row by lethal injections for a crime that we are told nothing about. The execution turns out to be a sham, and Cash has now been involuntarily recruited to star in a snuff movie.
You've had an unexpected reprieve. Do exactly as I say, and I promise this will be over before the night is out.
The person controlling the action is a Los Santos director, Lionel Starkweather. Cash has another shot at life, but there is a catch. Starkweather wants to see some honest-to-God gore, and because of that, Cash needs to take his opposition out as violently as possible. honestly, there isn't much of a story to talk about. Cash is thrown in an area patrolled by a gang. From there on in, Cash needs to complete a certain objective in that area to progress. When he is done with the area and practically eradicated the entire gang, we'll get a cutscene of Cash getting captured by Starkweather's personal guards known as the Cerberus, only to be thrown in a different area populated by a different gang. Rinse and repeat. Oh, and for the sake of argument, I will have a counter at the top left corner of the screen to show you how many times he got captured.
Each gang has their, let's just call it, their thing. These guys call themselves the Hoods, but none of that should bother you. As far as you're concerned, they're meat.
The first gang you take on is the Hoods. After taking out these gang members, Cash is captured by the Cerberus and taken to another area. He's then tossed in a scrapyard of sorts that is filled with white supremacists called Skins with a Z. Yeah, because that's edgy.
These Skins are boring me, dumbass supremacist. Always blaming others for their inadequacies. Butcher them, Cash. Cut them up. Beat them down and choke the life out of them.
After Cash slaughters his way through, he is captured again, and this time he's tossed in an abandoned zoo taken over by a group of paramilitary soldiers or something called war dogs.
Fall in and listen up. Eddie, it's time to get out there and nail that bastard. War dogs? Yeah!
One of the missions at this location forces you to stay hidden, because if you're spotted by the enemy, they will execute a member of Cash's family.
They're using them as bait, Cash. Bait. I know.
When Cash is done murdering people in cold blood at the zoo, he is captured again and taken to an abandoned shopping center, where you take on a new gang called Innocents. Yeah, once again with a Z at the end instead of an S.
And I want you to follow him over to the mall.
And this is where things start to get a bit interesting. If you manage to save a couple of Cash's family members from the previous level, you will realize that Starkweather had no intentions of letting them go. Instead, he had them brutally murdered, recorded it, and made a show of it for Cash.
Your old self is behind. I'm all the family you need now.
2 more levels later, which also involved an escorting mission, Cash is captured again and taken to Darkwoods Penitentiary, where the inmates have taken over.
The lunatics have taken over the asylum, Cash. The only way to reason with these gibbering idiots is with a stick and a gun.
By the time you reach the end of this location, Cash learns that Starkweather has double-crossed him and has set him up to be killed.
What can I say? You are a good leading man. The audience will love you. Don't expect any royalty checks where you're going, though.
Naturally, that's not how the story is going to end, and Cash ends up surviving. Not happy that things have gone tits up, Starkweather sends his right-hand man Ramirez to track Cash down and take him out. They succeed in capturing him, and decide to toy with him in a game of cat and mouse.
It's our turn now. Run! Run!
It doesn't work out well for them as Cash manages to take Ramirez and his entire crew out. I think it was at this point that even the writers of the game realized that they have shown Cash getting captured one too many times and they should probably take a break. So instead we see Cash get rescued by a news reporter who had covered Cash's execution. Turns out she has some important evidence against Starkweather, but they are all at her apartment.
Your execution!
Keep talking.
I've been following Starkweather's operation for months.
Who's Starkweather?
The guy that's been talking you through this whole circus of death?
Cash decides to help the reporter in retrieving said evidence.
Okay, let's go.
Huh?
To your apartment. Drive!
Meanwhile, Starkweather enlists the help of a corrupted police chief, Gary Schaefer, to bring in Cash and the reporter to him, alive.
To me. Hey, remember who you're talking to, you son.
Listen, you it's your job to clean up this city's mess. That's what you get paid for.
Shit.
Cash escorts the reporter to her apartment, and after she gets her hands on the evidence, he tells her to get out of the city because he was going to deal with Starkweather personally.
You're my backup if I don't make it. Have a nice life.
Cash then takes on any police officer dumb enough to be on Schaefer's payroll with any sort of firearm he could get his hands on. He is captured again, geez, really? And is taken to Starkweather's mansion. Lucky for us, the director's pet project, a man dressed in a pig's outfit wielding a chainsaw called Pigsy, gets loose and goes on a murdering rampage, indirectly letting Cash escape. After moving down Cerberus, we go up against Pixie in an intense game of cat and mouse. This is the part where I introduce my dear viewer to an old English saying, "when pigs fly," used to say that one thinks that something will never happen. Example, the train station will be renovated when pigs fly. Point is, pigs don't fly, and we see an example of that when Cash finally finishes off Pixie. Gravity. If only Newton was around to see this beautiful impact. Anyways, Cash takes on the remaining Cerberus with the newly acquired chainsaw, and then confronts Starkweather. After bringing his insides out and making sure he doesn't get an open casket funeral, we see the reporter from earlier saying that Starkweather's body was found after the police raided his mansion. They found questionable material at his place, exposing a snuff film ring and evidence against Gary Schaefer. Oh, and also Starkweather's murderer is still missing. Roll credits, and that's the end of the game. When it comes to story, Manhunt is bare bones basic. It's like Rockstar Games just wanted an excuse for the protagonist to be taken to different locations populated by various gang members and execute them mercilessly. Which is a shame really, because Rockstar Games have also given us some of the best narratively driven games in history. Pre-Manhunt we had GTA Vice City, which probably has to this day one of the best narratives in GTA games. Please don't hate me, GTA 5 players, I'm simply stating an opinion here. For example, in the mission where I had to stay hidden to save Cash's family, I don't know man, but there was no emotional bond there. I managed to save some of them, F in the chat for the one family member who I couldn't save.
What a bummer. You turn up alive and one of them kicks it.
But really dude, there was no backstory there. Should I care for them? They are strangers to me, so why should I save them? I would have appreciated if there was some sort of detail there where Cash feels sorry for what he put his family through because of the crime he may or may not have committed. But there was no mention of that, and omitting an emotional bond like that from the storytelling dampens the impact later when Cash sees the family he just rescued being murdered. I remember the first time I played it, I felt sorry for Cash. Now I was more disappointed and frustrated than angry or sad. What's the point of saving a bunch of nobodies who will be murdered in the next scene? There was no emotional damage there.
Emotional damage!
The game is narratively weak as well. For example, it is never explained what Cash was being executed for, what did he do, the family members he was trying to save, why were they not close to him? How did the news reporter find Cash, considering by the time in the game, Cash has been taken all over the city? Even better question, what was the reporter's name?
It doesn't matter what your name is!
I may be looking a bit too deep here, but these kind of things really help build up the game's story and the universe around it. I mean, for crying out loud, you clearly see Cash in the cutscene with a crouch animation. And that's coming from a company that made GTA 3 and Vice City. I'm sure they must have had an animation for someone sitting in the passenger seat of a car. If you skipped the spoilers and jumped directly here, here's my take on the story. If you're expecting some Last of Us level story that deals with the themes of trauma and violence, then you're playing the wrong game. Manhunt Story could have been awesome, but it isn't. It makes no effort in forming an emotional connection between the main character and what he's going through and the player interacting with the game. Time to talk about the gameplay, and this is where Manhunt truly shines. The game focuses heavily on stealth. Yes, you can get up close and personal with the enemies in the game, but you'll quickly realize that it is not the best approach. You have to hide in the shadows to take out enemies one at a time. There is a neat indicator at the bottom right corner that shows when you're hidden, when you are exposed, and when you are spotted. Your health is represented with the green bar, and the yellow bar represents your stamina, something you need to keep an eye on when you're running away from your pursuers. The whole idea of the game is for the player to sneak up behind enemies and taking them out as quietly as possible with the weapons they have. Apparently you cannot execute enemies with your bare hands in the game, which is a bummer because there were some times when I wanted to take an enemy out but I had no weapon. Anyways, weapons have different classes. The green ones are your single-use weapons like glass shards and plastic bags, but they're also the quietest. Then you have the blue class ones like machetes and crowbars, which are multi-use but they make some noise. Then you have the red class weapons, which are very noisy like your chainsaws and wooden bats, but they are very satisfying to use. And I mean really satisfying. Firearms also have a class system attached to them, but they are either blue class or red. For example, a revolver is a blue class weapon, and although it is noisy, it is nowhere near as noisy as an assault rifle or a shotgun, which are red class weapons. I guess the real difference between the two classes is how much stamina they consume when you have them equipped and are sprinting. Red class weapons consume more stamina than the blue ones, so it is something to keep in mind when you're reaching the end game levels. There are yellow class items as well in the game, which are used to cause distractions, and they can range from bricks to severed heads of your enemies. A fair warning though, you cannot use yellow class items to execute your enemies. Speaking of which, what separates Manhunt from other games is its execution feature. When you sneak up on an enemy, you will see Cash raising his hands, letting you know that he's close enough to perform an execution. Then you have to hold the X button. The longer you hold, the gruesome the execution will be. There are 3 levels of brutality here, but if you want the best rankings, you have to aim for the most brutal ones. There are firearms in the game too that you can use, and these range from nail guns to revolvers to shotguns, and near the end, assault rifles. I'm not going to lie here, but the gunplay is truly satisfying. You can't just run around shooting everyone in sight, because that would result in a quick death. You have to take cover behind objects, and you have to time it right when to pop out of cover to take your shot. There is a melee combat system here as well if you wish to settle things like a man. You can throw light punches, heavy punches, and grab enemies to punch or headbutt them. But the best thing about the melee combat is when your opponent feels overwhelmed, they will begin to cower and scream for help. In that case, you have to chase after them to finish them off. I need to mention here, the sound design of the game is awesome. Everything from the 80s inspired synths that play when you're spotted to the chatter of your enemies when they're talking to each other or taunting you. This game is meant to be played with headphones. Graphically, the game looks good. I'm playing the PS2 version and it still holds up. The levels look detailed enough and the character designs were distinct. The level design was pretty varied and matched the dark tone of the game. Carcer City is a grim place and the levels show that. From the rundown back alleys to the abandoned zoo to the subway tunnels. The level design never made me feel like I was a prey, but it never put me at ease either. And I loved it. What I was most surprised with was how the game managed to keep itself fresh. Like I said earlier, Cash is constantly getting captured and is taken to new areas all the time. But the game tries to give new objectives for the players to follow. Sometimes you're escorting an NPC who you can leave behind. Sometimes you have to escort an NPC that will freak out and will come looking for you if left behind for too long. Sometimes you have to stay hidden to save some NPCs.
Oh man, he's toast.
Other times you have to perform certain executions to progress through. The game tries to keep itself fresh, which is a good thing because it does drag on for longer than it needs to. Which brings me to some of the issues I had with the game. As I mentioned earlier, I was not a big fan of the story. I feel like Rockstar Games used the story as an excuse to take the player from one part of the city to another to keep the level design as varied as possible. The camera was also an issue for me. I could move the camera a bit with the right thumbstick to get a better view of the world around me, but as long as I was moving, if the character was not moving and if I moved the right stick, it would put me in first person mode, which was a pain because sometimes I would be standing still, and because I'm so used to playing other third person games, I would move the stick to see what's around the corner and then boom, first person view mode. I tried to look in the options menu to change it or turn it off completely, but there was no option for it. The game also spikes up its difficulty level near the end. I know the end game levels are supposed to be difficult, but my god, it is ridiculous in this game. The 5 missions before the last one were extremely difficult. Yes, by that time just about anyone with a gun is after cash in the story, but it throws so many enemies at you at once that it becomes impossible to survive. I felt like I finished those missions by chance rather than with skill. For example, in a mission near the end, patrolling enemies were equipped with assault rifles, which meant I would die with a couple of hits. I had to find a way in a mansion, and no matter how many enemies I killed, they kept cropping up. I died so many times on that level, I almost gave up entirely. Then I did a quick Google search to see what I was doing wrong, and to my surprise, I had to kill 2 snipers perched up on a balcony, and until I did that, enemies kept respawning. So I had to be super quick at killing the ones that stand in my way, quickly make my way inside, kill the snipers, and then deal with the remaining ones, all the while making sure I don't get killed. Yeah, thanks a lot game for telling me that. And trust me, there were many moments like that where the game didn't tell me something, and the next thing I knew, I was facing a horde of enemies armed to the teeth. But there is one game-breaking bug that I need to mention here. On the mission Fueled by Hate, I had to use a crane to move an obstacle out of my way to progress forward, but a couple of enemies jump on me and I have to use the crane to clear the area. For some reason, I got stuck in the crane. I couldn't move it, I couldn't exit it, and no matter how much damage I took, I didn't die. Apparently this is a bug that was present in the game when it first came out, and it is also present in other versions as well.
What the hell is even that?
Lucky for me, I was able to get past it, but if you pick it up and come across this bug, well, you're kinda screwed and you probably have to play the whole mission again. I know I had to 4 times. So what is my honest opinion on this PS2 classic? Manhunt is a solid third-person stealth game that can also be referred to as a survival horror sometimes, with its realistic action and grim urban setting. The stealth mechanics are solid, the sound design is top-notch, and the executions are brutal. Yes, it has its issues with difficulty spikes, but aside from that, Manhunt is a solid game. I was going to end this video with some wishful thinking that Rockstar may remake the game, but we all know that's not gonna happen. Hey guys, thanks for checking out this video. If you made it this far, and just so you know, I really appreciate it. Let me know in the comment section below if there's a PS2 game you want me to look at, or if you disagree or agree with my opinion on Manhunt. Other than that, I want to thank you one more time as I bid you farewell. Until we meet again, peace out angels, and stay awesome.